Welcome back to Capitol Review. I'm Mark Hall. There have been a lot of court filings against the Trump administration in the last few weeks, and to break a few of them down is the Hill's Zach Schonfeld. He joins us on Capitol Review this week. He's the courts and legal reporter with our media partners at the Hill. Zach, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
We're glad to have you. How many court cases is the Trump administration and his allies dealing with right now?
By my count, they are now facing more than 100 lawsuits that challenge major Trump administration directives. And these lawsuits really do run the gamut. If you think about a major action that the president has taken since his inauguration, there's probably a lawsuit, if not multiple, over it. So there's a lot of immigration lawsuits on everything from his efforts to restrict birthright citizenship, to end new refugee admissions, to everything in between in the immigration space. There are dozens of lawsuits over this new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short, and their efforts to implant itself at various federal agencies across the bureaucracy. There are also many lawsuits that deal with the administration's efforts to freeze aspects of federal spending and federal grants. And finally, there's a bucket of lawsuits that deal with the administration's crackdown on DEI and transgender rights. So really a wide range of lawsuits here. But like I said, when you put it all together, there's more than 100 total.
Zach, two judges have now indefinitely blocked the president on freezing federal grants and loans. What impact could this have?
Yeah, these are some of the most sweeping injunctions that we've seen in these various lawsuits as it comes to federal spending. Under both of these judges' orders, these lawsuits go back to that Office of Management and Budget memo that was released in the early days of this new administration. It was quickly rescinded after a lot of controversy. That memo had directed agencies to freeze federal grants and loans on a blanket basis. Even though that memo has been rescinded, these lawsuits have continued, and as you teed up in the question, there are two of these federal judges have now indefinitely blocked the administration from trying to carry out this blanket spending freeze, whether it's under the name of the OMB memo or under some other directive. But in addition to those two suits, you also have a lot of lawsuits that deal with very specific aspects of, on a particular grant or a particular area. For example, there was just a new lawsuit filed this past week by a group of theater groups who say they're not getting grant funding because the shows that they produce support DEI efforts. But certainly those two rulings are the most sweeping injunctions that we've seen.
And Zach, the Supreme Court ruled this week to stop the freeze of foreign aid. Do you think that we will see the Supreme Court make other decisions?
I do, and none of these cases other cases are at the Supreme Court quite yet, but there certainly are a lot of cases that are waiting in the wings and are getting closer to the high court by the day. So some that come to mind in particular, I mentioned before the cases surrounding birthright citizenship. Multiple of those cases are now in the appeals court, so just one level below the Supreme Court, so we could soon see those get to the justices. Also, the other line of cases that seems to be working its way through the courts very quickly are Trump's various firings of independent agency leaders, these leaders that under federal law are protected from termination without cause. The administration has been arguing in court that those removal protections are unconstitutional. They believe it encroaches on the president's authority. It's really an expanded view of presidential power that the courts have been grappling with. Those two could reach the Supreme Court, as well as the dozens of other cases that are still in the very early stages. So we have seen the first case get to the Supreme Court, but my guess is over these next 4 years, we're going to see a lot more get there too.
Zach Schonfeld with The Hill, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.